Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 4th annual Morgan Hill Women's Week Powerful Women's Panel. I am one of your moderators this evening. My name is Caitlin Robinette Jachimowicz. I'm an attorney, former council member in Morgan Hill, and I guess, Rich, treasurer in waiting?
Treasurer in waiting, yes.
Something along those lines. This is one of my absolute favorite nights of the year. This is not the way I would like to be greeting you all this evening. Women's Week is about fellowship with women. It's about coming together and supporting each other and sharing our stories, and also celebrating the men who support us in the work that we do. Because of that, seeing each other in person and being able to really connect in that way is so important. And I think we haven't even really realized how important that was until we're unable to do it. So I hope that you take my sincere hello and warmth and greeting to you, and it's reaching you virtually. This has been a really tough season, I think, for all of us, this week in particular. But I hope that this panel will be uplifting in some ways, though it will be serious in others, but that we can just really try to connect with each other the best that we can. I would like to thank our sponsors for Women's Week. Normally, I get to do a lot more of this at our Monday event, but because of the smoke, we've had to put off our drive-in movie. So stay tuned for when that event will be. But our partners this week, of course, are the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce, the County of Santa Clara's Office of Women's Policy, SURGE, which stands for Standing Up for Racial Justice, the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival, the Morgan Hill Historical Society, and of course, from the beginning, the City of Morgan Hill. Normally, we have this event in the council chambers, and the city hosts us in that way. So in light of that, I wanted to invite our mayor to kind of start us off with some opening remarks and help me with the welcome. So mayor and first daughter, Emma, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Say hi. So I'm sorry I keep disappearing. My background there of Anderson Reservoir. Welcome everyone to the 4th annual Women's Week here in Morgan Hill. As Caitlin mentioned, my name is Rich Constantine, and we are representing the city of Morgan Hill. We want to welcome everybody. Emma is 4, so she's been to every one of these. And it kind of reminds me, having a daughter reminds me of just how momentous this year is, because we are celebrating the centennial of the women's right to vote. But I'm also reminded that not every woman, or every man for that matter, was granted that right 100 years ago. So it bears in mind that even today we're fighting for the right to vote. We're seeing that across the board being threatened. So it makes celebrating the 100th anniversary even that more important, but it helps to remind us that we still have to continue the fight. And so I won't get on my soapbox too much, but again, the 19th Amendment, the celebration of the 19th Amendment is very important. But again, we need to remember that we're fighting for everyone's rights, and I'm fighting for my daughter's right to make sure that she has no barriers before her. I've always considered myself somebody who was socially minded and wanting to make sure that everyone's rights were allowed. But it's even more heightened now, having a daughter, to making sure that she not only understands that she can do anything she wants to do, which she does on a regular basis throughout the house, but that everybody has that same right. So again, I want to welcome everybody on behalf of the city of Morgan Hill. We're in this new Zoom reality, and I don't know if you all are aware, but I'm actually in 2 Zooms right now. I'm attending another Zoom meeting from the local policy management group, makers group for Caltrain. We meet every 4th Thursday of the month. So I apologize, I'll have to be going back to that. But again, we wanted to welcome everybody up to this 4th Annual Women's Week of Powerful Women's Panel. Say welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Rich. And thanks to the city for your continued support and all that you do for inclusiveness in the city. We really
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure.
So now, and you go ahead and drop off. If you want to tune back in, you're welcome to join us on Facebook or something, but we won't be offended when you drop off. I just want to move to a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned earlier, we will still have our movie. The genesis of Women's Week was when I saw Wonder Woman in theaters with my husband and thought I really would enjoy this more if I was watching this with other women. And so in light of that, we always do a movie every year. This year, in light of everything that was going on, we thought we would do something a little bit more lighthearted and fun. So we will be watching A League of Their Own and in a drive-in setting as soon as it's safe to do so with the air. So if you email Brittney at morganhill.org, she can keep you updated on when we're going to be able to reschedule that movie. Now, as far as the format for this evening, I have a number of questions that I've given the panelists ahead of time. So I will be moderating the beginning of that discussion. We have Brittney here, and she is going to be watching the chat function. So if you're at home watching and you have a question for one or more of the panelists, if you want to type it into the chat function, when we get to questions and answers towards the end, Brittney will help me moderate those questions. We're not going to be unmuting anybody for security reasons. The chamber has had some people hack into their Zoom meetings. So if you just put your name, we'll make sure to announce your name at the same time that we are asking your questions so the panelists know who you are and where you come from. The other thing I wanted to quickly do before we get to the discussion is, you know, that Women's Week is powered by just a 4-person committee that is really clear on what our mission is, and we don't do a lot to promote each other. But because we are virtual, I did want to give a shout out to my other organizers this year because we've had a big year. The first is that Cecilia Ponzini from the Edward Boss Prado Foundation received Women of the Year from Assembly Member Robert Rivas and AD 30 for her work and her foundation. I'm on the board of her foundation, but she also is, she's been feeding people during COVID. Today, she started a pilot program where she's providing internet for low-income students that don't have access to virtual learning. She is just 24/7, just doing what she can for people in our community. So I really wanted to give a shout out to Cecilia and the award that she won this year. Also, Katie Kira is one of our organizers, and she's not here this evening because she's currently working for the census, which I wanted to thank her for. The last time I spoke to Katie, she had just finished a 40-hour work day because the federal government is putting so much pressure on the census program. She's working nonstop through the night trying to get the census completed. So if you've not completed your census, it's really important that you do so. And we want to thank Katie for her service there. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that a year ago, Brittney was here as a representative of the chamber. However, in the last year, she's been promoted to CEO of the chamber. So I wanted to say congratulations to Brittney for being the CEO. And I wanted to introduce Brittney. Then Brittney, if you'll go ahead and give us a little bit of information on our panelists, and then we can get started. Oh, one more thing. Sure. It looks like I failed, even though I'm a member of AAUW and they're all my ladies, I forgot to mention that the AAUW was one of our partner orgs. So my apologies, AAUW, I love you, and thank you for what you do for us too.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone. Brittney Sherman, CEO, President for the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us for the 4th Annual Women's Week and the Powerful Women's Panel discussion. We are honored to be joined here by the following panelists. Superior Court Judge, retired, Risa Pichon. Judge Pichon was appointed to the Judicial Council of California by California Supreme Court Chief Justice Malcolm Lucas and served from 1994 to 97. She served as a Superior Court Judge of the County of Santa Clara from 1998 until her retirement on April 18, 2019. In May, she was presented with the 2019 Santa Clara County Trial Lawyers Association Lifetime Achievement Award, and in 2018, Judge Pichon was inducted into the Black Legends Hall of Fame of Silicon Valley, Santa Clara, honoring Black pioneers of Silicon Valley. Today, she is a panelist with JAMS, Judicial Arbitration and Mediation Services, a private provider of alternative dispute resolution services worldwide. She is a member of the Santa Clara University Board of Regents and currently serves as its vice president, the Santa Clara University Law School Advisory Board, and the Santa Clara University Markula Center for Applied Ethics Advisory Board. She's also the 2019-2020 Santa Clara University Law School Distinguished Jurist in Residence. Judge Pichon has been married to Ulysses Pichon for 45 years. In her spare time, Judge Pichon enjoys beading and shopping. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have State Senate 15 candidate Ann Ravel. Ann was Santa Clara County Counsel for many years, where she was recognized as California Attorney of the Year as well as Public Attorney of the Year for her groundbreaking work. President Obama appointed her twice as Deputy Assistant Attorney General and as Chair of the Federal Election Commission. Governor Brown appointed her as Chair of the California Fair Political Practices Commission. Ann grew up in Chile, moving to San Jose when she was 11, and today loves going on walks with her Wheaton Terrier, Harpo. Thank you, Ann. Next, we have General Director of Opera San Jose, Khori Dastoor. She's all aspects of artistic planning and business operations for Opera San Jose. She is one of only 6 women and the only woman of color leading a major opera company in the United States. Among her missions are renewing Opera San Jose's commitment to developing and curating emerging talent and elevating the company as a vibrant artistic incubator in the heart of Silicon Valley. During her 7-year tenure with Opera San Jose, she has prioritized role debuts, creating opportunities for its audiences to hear exciting new artists, and has produced some of the biggest successes in the company's history, including the American premiere of Almar, I'm gonna butcher this one, I'm so sorry, Corey, Juscher's Cinderella, and the critically acclaimed new production of Jay Keggy's Moby Dick. She previously served as Associate Director of the Packard Humanities Institute, responsible for arts, music, and archaeology initiatives, and as Director of the San Francisco District of the Metropolitan Opera National Council Editions. Ms. Dastoor received her Bachelor of Music from New England Conservatory and completed doctoral studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, earning the Dean's Award for the School of Arts and Architecture. Thank you, Khori. Last but not least, we have owner of Maria Sid Agency, Farmers Insurance, president of the board, Poppy Jasper Incorporated, and community advocate, Maria Sid. Maria is born and raised Californian, daughter of one immigrant parent from Mexico and a Texan mother from Yankee descent, who has overcome many struggles both as a Mexican-American and a woman. Maria has moved her way up from working in the agriculture industry to graduating college to now being the successful business owner of Maria Sid Insurance Agency and the director of VIP hospitality events at Mythos USA. Maria serves as a board director for Youth Alliance, an advocate for the Edward Boss Prado Foundation, is the president of the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival Board of Directors, and was a founding committee member for the #GilroyStrong movement, dedicated to raising money, awareness, and healing for the victims and families of the Gilroy Garlic Festival tragedy. As a woman, Maria is an exemplary role model to aspiring women entrepreneurs, coaching and mentoring young adults to accomplish their dreams. Some of her most unforgettable moments are participating in the Laguna Seca Raceway and Coda of the Americas, alongside actors like John Hensley, Keanu Reeves, and Taylor Kinney. Thank you, Maria, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's really, I know I've read all of your bios, but it's just really so impressive to hear the details of all of you in one go. It's just so honored to be here with you this evening and spending this time with you. Thank you so much for being here and for logging on with us. So I'm going to start with some softball questions to hopefully get your tongues wagging and loosened up. If I had thought about it ahead of time, I should have FedExed you all a bottle of wine to kind of get some good answers from you originally. But I'm not going to direct my questions to anyone in particular. I'm hoping we can just have a conversation. But let's start off with, what was your dream job as a kid?
I'd like to start if that's okay.
Yes,
Believe
please,
it or
Maria.
not, I wanted to be a nun. I wanted to be a nun, yes. I grew up in a very strict cultural, religious family. I absolutely adored the religion. And the nuns were just so pure and innocent and so helping and inviting. And I really, really thought in my heart I would be a nun, but obviously that didn't work out.
Didn't work out.
So yeah, then I went to the second thing. I would go to Mexico once a year with my family, and my aunt was a trauma nurse, so she had me, help her, do some volunteer hours. And I thought, wow, I would look so good in that suit, and I love helping others. I want to be a nurse. Next thing you know, I figured out very soon that the sense of blood in the sight just didn't go well with me. So yeah, those were two interesting things I really thought I would be when I grew up.
Well, this question.
Oh, go ahead. I could say I didn't have something that I wanted to do that I could think of as a child, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And that was because when I was 11, I used to babysit for 50 cents an hour with little kids and babies. And I knew I didn't want to have anything to do with children. That was it. No teacher, no preschools, none of that.
You ended up a mom.
Yes, I did.
I shouldn't have let Ann go before me because I have the same answer. I did not know what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I've been asked that question many times, and I've searched my memory over and over. And all I can remember was in the 8th grade, everybody was talking about what they wanted to be. The pressure was on, so I said I wanted to be a secretary because that's all I could think of. But I really did not know. I have 2 parents who have college degrees. I was born in the 50s, and when I grew up, it was unheard of that your parents had college degrees. They went to historically Black universities and colleges, and so I looked to them, and the only thing I knew as a kid was that I would be going to college, and I would be going to the college my mom went to. I only applied to one in my senior year of high school, and that is where I went. And when I got there, they asked me to declare my major. I said, I don't know. So I really had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I would enjoy being an adult.
What about you, Khori?
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the only one who didn't have a plan. My honest answer is that when I think back to my childhood, I just remember feeling very different from everybody else and very lonely. And what I wanted more than anything was a sense of belonging, a community that I felt that I could have as my own and that I could be authentically myself. And so that was always the thing that I thought about most. And I was a musical child. I used to sing to myself all the time. And when I was in 4th grade, I started working for the LA Opera and the children's chorus. So I guess I never really figured out what to do. It just sort of one thing led to another, and music's been my whole life. But I didn't have a set profession either that I was clamoring towards, just that sort of feeling.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that there might be some high school kids on the call that maybe will get some new ideas after hearing from you women tonight. So what are some of the women that have inspired you, either in your profession or just in the world? Who's somebody that you have looked to for inspiration? Anne, I'm going to start with you. Oh, Anne, you're muted.
There are a number of them, but the 2 that really stand out for me are, one was Louise Rennie, who was the city attorney in San Francisco, and she did work that was very unusual for public lawyers. And it was work on behalf of the community, and plaintiffs' work that was more about social justice and other issues like that. And that inspired me to do the same as county counsel. I was also really inspired earlier when I was in college. My first vote as a person who was able to vote, and I know the mayor was talking about that, and it's really significant, was for Shirley Chisholm, who was a Black legislator, the first Black woman, the first to both run for president and the first woman to run for president. And that was in 1972. And I was so enthralled with her because she was really outspoken and strong. And that was so significant for me. And so that was a really big influence on me, which also led to Hillary Clinton, but we could stop because running for president as well. Neither of them won. But Shirley Chisholm actually had the highest number of votes in California in the primary.
And she certainly paved the way.
She did.
Yeah. What about Maria? Do you have any women that have inspired you?
Oh, yeah. I have two personal that are inspirational, which was my mother and my grandmother. And then, of course, my icon woman, my grandmother, Maria Cruz Lemus Cid. She was born in Zacatecas, Mexico in 1910. She died at 103 years old. So I was privileged to be able to sit with her and listen to so many amazing stories, living through the revolution, the time of the Cristeros, when the president was trying to demolish all religion, and her having to, in secret, marry my grandfather in a cave with the priest because she loved her religion so much. Hence why I wanted to be a nun, because of my grandma. And her compassion and her love. I mean, she was just the glue of our family, and she taught me the values that I have now. And then there's my mother of Yaqui descent, which brought in a whole nother type of personality. She was just absolutely sweet, caring, very involved in unions, very involved in picketing for civil rights and for fair wages. So of course, as a little girl, I admired that. So I would go with her, which is why I'm so involved now. And then lastly, her compassion for people. She would raise funds for family in needs, even if she had just met them. And all while raising her family and working 2 jobs and running a business, which now you kind of get where I get my energy from my mother. And lastly, Frida Kahlo. Oh my God. Her art, her music, her beliefs in politics, or just her beliefs whatsoever. She never at that time let anyone speak for her. She always spoke her mind. And, I really wanted to be like that. I wanted that part of me when I got older. And those are the 3 women that had a lot to do with my upbringing. Frida Kahlo, of course, just by book, but in life lessons.
What about
The
you?
list can go on, but then I just keep going and going.
No, I no, it's perfect. What about you, Khori?
It would be harder to say the men that have influenced me. Actually, I feel like my whole life is a story of women. And certainly opera is a field about strong women paving the way, and how arts and destiny kind of collide for progress. So, I mean, we don't have to look very far. Those of you in the Morgan Hill community who know Irene Dallas know that I have very big, incredible shoes to fill. She brought me to San Jose. She believed in my talent before anybody else. And the thing I remember about Irene is just her presence and the respect she commanded. And she was absolutely not at all concerned with fitting into a man's world. She was in her world, and men, got to visit occasionally, but that wasn't the point. When I became a mom, I think that's when I really understood how much my grandmother has shaped who I am. And you see it in your mannerisms with your own children, and you put yourself in their shoes. My grandmother had 6 kids in war-torn Indonesia, so she was, her husband was in a different camp and under Japanese occupation, and he didn't meet my mom until she was 3 years old after the war. And by then, my mom had already had scarlet fever and a bunch of things and had been sent to die several times. So to imagine my grandmother sort of watching the bodies of soldiers float by and look for her husband every day and stay strong for her family, that didn't dawn on me as a child. And when I became a mom, I began to realize the stock of women around me. And I lost my mom in April, actually, a few months ago. And I've realized that my grandmother, my mom, they're still with me on my shoulders every day, as is Irene, as is Maria Callas. And she was a big influence on my adolescence.
That's beautiful. Judge Pichon. Everyone else gets first name, but I'm never going to be able to tell you anything other than Judge.
Please may call me Risa.
I can't. I apologize.
Well, there are two. One is Rosa Parks. I admired her courage when she sat on the back of the bus and went to jail. I think about her quite often and admire the courage that she has, because I'm not sure that I would have been able to do that. And I always feel like I would fall short if I were called upon to have to do what she did. I had the honor of meeting her and sitting next to her when she was honored here in San Jose for her 80th birthday. My daughter was selected to give her a gift and make a little speech. And so we sat next to Rosa Parks. And I was so in awe that I couldn't think of anything to say to her. And to this day, I'm so sad that I didn't ask her more questions or just talk to her about how I felt. And the other person is my mom. She has always been my guiding light, always. She gave me some very important lessons. She raised 5 children pretty much by herself because my dad was in the Army. And many times we did not travel with him. And if we did travel, he would have to go first, and then my mom would be left packing up a house with 5 children. She was strong and courageous. I admired her for it, but she was forced to be reckoned with, and we definitely obeyed her. So she had 5 kids who obeyed her every word. She taught me some things that are so important, and it is the way that I have lived my life. And that is that I should believe in myself. And the other is that I should never be dependent on anybody else, that I have to take charge of my life financially and otherwise, because that other person may not be here. So I had to be responsible for myself and be able to take care of myself.
Sounds like she went to the same school of thought as my mom. I think I have that written in a journal somewhere from a teenage years. Mom says you have to be able to take care of yourself.
Mine was even more direct. She said, never rely on a man. You have to get a teaching credential.
Because I have a little bit of a relationship with a couple of you, I have a couple stories that I'm going to intersperse. And this one of the women who has inspired me is Anne Ravel, who I'm so honored that you agreed to be on this panel. And growing up in Morgan Hill, I didn't know any attorneys. I very much consider myself a small town girl and, solidly middle class. And I was very intimidated to go to law school. Honestly, the reason I went to law school is because I loved the show The West Wing. And in one scene, and I didn't know how to do any of that. And in one scene, somebody says, "What do you mean you need a lawyer? We're all lawyers." And so I thought, I guess I have to go to law school if I want to make a difference in the world. And I took a class called Social Justice and Local Government, taught by our county counsel, Anne Ravel. And Anne was so important it still is, that she came and taught the class, but she had attorneys that worked underneath her that were supposed to have the contact with the students. And so each student worked under one of those attorneys. And on the first day we went around and she said, "Tell me what you're interested in and I will assign you to a project." And I said, "I don't know if I belong here because what I'm interested in is policy. And I don't know if law school is the right place for me." And she said, "Well, that's what I do at the county council. So you're with me, kid." And so instead of having me work with one of the attorneys, Anne had me work directly with her, immediately gave me her cell phone number. And for that whole semester, she would text me all day long when she had questions from county soups. We did research on everything from football stadiums to, stuff that we probably can't talk about. But just the fact that, that Anne approached her work as if I was her peer is something that I've never forgotten. And so when I meet young women, I try to give them the same respect that Anne gave me, that really I never had the sense that she thought that she was too busy or too important to teach me something. And that's something that I'm trying to bring forward. So thank you for that, Anne. So all of you have reached sort of the epitome of your careers. You all have, we have somebody who runs her own shop. We've got, we've got a general director. We've got Judge Pichon was the presiding judge at Hall of Justice. Anne has gone from being the head in the county at the state to being in the Oval Office with Obama. So in your trajectory to get where you've been, what are some of the tough decisions that you've had to make, and how have they affected your career, and what lessons did you learn from them? I'm gonna kind of leave this open-ended for what you think is maybe the most helpful for people listening.
I think I'll try to speak generally, because for me, the toughest decision was to leave my performance career behind. And I think the lesson for me there is that you do have to make space for change. If you think that your life will sort of transform incrementally, it might, but sometimes it's that need to sort of step into the abyss and to risk the failure and the emptiness that comes with not knowing, especially if you're a planner and you're an overachiever. It feels like you want to know all the steps ahead of you, but sometimes you have to listen to that voice inside you that says there's something different coming for me, or I'm ready for a change, and really make yourself sit in that discomfort, and then the answers come in time. But I think about that a lot now facing COVID. We don't know where in this pandemic we are, maybe the end of the beginning, maybe the beginning of the middle, and we don't know how this virus will change patron behavior or the way people consume art, or what kind of art they want, or if choruses of singers will ever be able to meet in the same way for a while. So making space for what's coming next instead of clinging to what is familiar has been an important lesson for me to learn. And it's not easy. It's really, really difficult.
Let me follow that, because my thoughts are very similar to yours. But you said it more elegantly than I would. Honestly, I'd say that the hardest decision and the best decision that I made was to decide to go to the Obama administration, to the Department of Justice. And I was the county counsel, had been the county counsel and in the office for 30 years. And I pretty much thought, this would be great. It's something different. And if I don't go to do this, I will probably be in my 90s before I leave the county council job, because I'm working all the time anyway, and I love it. But what I did was just pick up and go somewhere that I had no idea what I was getting into. None. I knew very little about federal law. I knew nothing about the organization of the Department of Justice. And so it was really a leap of faith, hugely so. And when I got there, I found that a lot of the other people that were in the department at the beginning of the administration were people who'd been in the Clinton administration. All of them went to Harvard Law School or Yale. And I felt really insecure that I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I was, you know, on the East Coast, away from my family. But it turned out to be one of the best things I ever did, because I did so many different unusual things. And even though I felt insecure and not smart enough the entire time I was there, when I left, people said to me, you know, you were the best Deputy Assistant Attorney General ever, because you care about people and you care about the country. You're not just interested in arcane issues of the law and defending the government. And that was really meaningful to me, to realize that. And I finally, even at that stage in my life, it made me feel a lot more secure about my own capabilities, which surprisingly I wasn't, you know.
Well, I had a criminal law assignment when the 3 strikes law was passed. And one of the hardest responsibilities for a judge is sentencing. And as we all know, it is very important to the public what sentences you impose. But anyway, with the 3 strikes law, it was a mandatory sentencing law. And if a person had 2 serious or violent felonies on their record, it didn't matter what type of felony was the 3rd. And so we had to sentence based on the fact that there were 2 serious or violent felonies. And with the 3rd felony, whatever it was, it could have been petty theft with a prior, the person was going to receive 25 years to life. But the judge retained discretion to dismiss 1 or more of the strikes. And that's where you learned that you have to be very strong and independent and do what you think is right. There's an extreme amount of pressure from both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution to go ahead and impose the 25 years to life, the defense to look at the factors, to look at the defendant and do what's right under the law and give the appropriate punishment. So I exercised my discretion quite a bit, but quite a few people did receive 25 years to life. But there were a few that really bothered me after I did impose it. It was the right, correct sentence under the law, but it didn't make me feel good about what I had done. And then the law was amended many years later. And that law said the 3rd felony had to also be a serious or violent felony. And if a defendant was sentenced with that 3rd felony being less than a serious or violent felony, the defendant could petition to come back to court to be sentenced again. I had 5 come back in that situation, and I got to redo those. There was one in particular that haunted me, and he actually came back, and I was able to resentence him. He had been in jail the appropriate amount of time by then, and I was able to release him, and that gave me peace. I called the attorney that he had at the time, because she's now a judge, and I remembered when I gave him 25 years to life, she actually cried. I will just never forget it. But at least I was able to rectify those and do what I thought was right and just under the law.
That's great. Maria, I don't want to make you answer questions if you don't.
No, I'm just really admiring everything these beautiful women are saying. And, you know, I'm going to start with my best. I'm sorry, I was just taking everything in.
Yeah.
My best decision was, of course, having my child. Even though I was 16, I had my son. I got to meet my partner I'm with right now, and I absolutely adore my life with my family, with both him and my son. They provided me the support and the strength and the courage to get involved in the insurance industry, which is something I was dabbling with when I was younger, and purchased a book of business. I only wish, and this is where the worst decision of my life came, I would have bought it sooner when I was offered it at 19 years old. Because right now I'd be semi-retired, maybe going on trips. And, you know, maybe slowing it down. Who knows? I just can't stay still, so who knows? And the absolute hardest decision I've ever had to make in my career in the insurance industry is having to let go of a staff member. I run a tight ship. My staff are my family. It's not just a job here, it's a career. So when I invest time and energy and love, because that's what I do, I love my staff, it really hurts to break those ties and to have to let them go, because I know I'm not just impacting their life, I'm impacting their family's life because I'm taking away that income. And that's always the hardest thing. So life lessons from it is I try to be a little bit more careful. I try to tell them that this position is a career and I will mentor them. They will, when they leave, they will take my mentorship and excel at whatever it is they do in life. And so far it's been a blessing because my girls have been with me now 4 years, no complaints. I've had one that's going to leave me because she's moving to San Diego, but that's okay. I'm very happy that she's going to take the life skills I've taught her with her. Thank you.
That's beautiful. So we're seeing increasing numbers. We have majority of new law school enrollees are women. Women dominate new college applications. You know, we have more than ever, we have women who are educating themselves, but we're still not seeing that reflected in the highest echelons of our country. We're not seeing a majority or even equal women in the boardroom, in CEOs, in Congress, as Anne very well knows, in state government, even in California. What do you think are the barriers for these women? And what do you think that we can do to overcome them? Or what have you done to overcome some of those barriers in your careers?
Well, I believe that change can happen and it doesn't have to be as slow as it is now, but change comes from the top. The leader, CEO, board of directors of the company, they set the culture and philosophy of the organization. If there's silence from the top, then nothing is going to happen. Now, if the CEO and board of directors aren't inclined that way, well, then maybe it's time for some education and training on diversity and inclusion. And hopefully, with the way things are today, they have found that that's important for them to do. One reason that I've seen that the culture stays the same at organizations is that people tend to gravitate to people that they know, are comfortable with, and are familiar with. And so when they go to hire new employees or promote, they go to the people that they know and the people they are most comfortable with. And it may perpetuate the look of the company. And one reason that this happens is, say you have candidates, 2 or 3 candidates who are equally qualified. But one of the differences is that the person comes with diversity as a person of color or as female. They may say, well, we don't want to use that criteria as a tipping point because they have negative thoughts about affirmative action from the 60s. And they also saw the courts strike down the use of quotas. And so they feel that if they make the decision, the breaking decision based on color or diversity, that they will fall into what happened in the past and they can be challenged legally for making that decision. But that's no excuse. That's why they have a legal department. That's why they have lawyers on retainer. If they are uncomfortable about who they hire, or if they can make diversity one of the reasons to base the decision on when everything else is equal, then they need to get that legal opinion so that they can do the right thing. Companies also, the main point I wanted to make, and it's something we talked about before the program started, is that women and people of color, we have our own responsibilities to do this, and we must do our part. We can make it happen also. I mean, I've seen it happen too many times where someone has made it in the leadership department, and then they can turn around. There's plenty of talent out there, plenty of skill, and we need to reach out and advocate to bring that person in and to make sure that they do well in a leadership position.
Oh, Anne, you're muted.
Good thing. I think Risa is being too nice. I mean, I think that it is true that people tend to gravitate towards those people that they are most familiar with. But I would say there is still an enormous amount of sexism and racism in law firms because of partners, many fewer partners. And I will say, their recent report came out about Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, and it's shocking how few women, there's only about 20-some% of women that are in the workforce, in a very large workforce in the city of LA. And of the top 100 earners, there's only 2 women. So there's something structural about it. And the same, of course, we know is true of a lot of corporate situations, corporations in this valley, but all throughout the country. And I think that personally, because I'm in the middle now of actually suing, because I also have a law practice on the side, 2 of them, in fact, and I'm suing several tech companies for their failure to have diversity and inclusion, both for women as well as people of color. And there is, they are cases that do say that there is some requirement to do this now in, these are shareholder derivative suits. And so we're gonna win, trust me. And one thing is to try to get far more work in doing diversity. And then, you know, from the government point of view, there is no excuse for it, really. So that's what I'm talking about LA. And I know that there's laws that have been passed about equal pay, laws that have been passed about women on boards. And I think that there's more that can be done. In Germany, the chancellor there has set up organizations that work from the government with corporations to assure that they spend more time thinking about diversifying their workforce. And there's things we could do to be a lot more affirmative about how to bring people in. And I'm not sure that people, I mean, you're right, Risa, that they should be, you know, talking to their lawyers, but sometimes their lawyers are gonna say, you're fine, don't worry. And really what they need is push. And that's why I think that we have to be much more aggressive about requiring this for both women and for people of color.
I feel at times that women don't have a voice. Their views are not heard, and often men make the decisions for them or for us without consulting us. Women are challenged, and a lot of times people don't like that. They don't like change. People get scared seeing women in power and being strong professionals and with successful careers. They find that very intimidating. In reality, women bring a diverse approach of ideas, diversity, creativity. And this is what we have to bring to the table. And this is what they're scared of. We need to find a way to overcome it and remember to know our truth.
I mean, the sort of essence of your question is about patriarchy itself and all the reasons from infancy through, you know, adulthood that women receive different messaging around what is the female ideal and what is expected of us. I remember really, really bristling at being called ambitious my whole life and feeling like that was a dig. And I knew it was a dig. I don't know if that's a dig for men. It felt like people telling me that I was unattractive, that I was grasping for things, that I should be more gracious, more polite, more humble, more of a listener. And I see, you know, I see my kids, my daughters are 3 and 6, their play and how they frame boy-girl dynamics and what that means. And I realize how early it starts. A huge barrier is that women have children, and that very often at a time in your career where you are just moving into what will become pre-leadership positions, that women often make the choice to take a big step back professionally. And then you're left with this sort of gap on the resume, if you will, or this sort of need to do everything all at the same time and try to be excellent at 6 full-time jobs. And that's the lack of sort of support for the whole family. Childcare options is a huge reason why a lot of women I know that have incredible leadership capabilities are sort of taken off of that leadership track. And it should not be that you need to make a choice that you're not going to have a family in order to be a leader. So I think that's a huge barrier. And just speaking more personally, a barrier for me has been feeling constantly sexualized by the men in power around me, and feeling that there wasn't a brain, there wasn't an idea, there was only this need on their part to have this fantasy play out for them. And I was a singer, so I was often on stage, and that there was often a dynamic of fetishizing, and you're so talented and you're so beautiful, and it was a real struggle to be more than that and to be taken seriously as someone who had leadership capability. That might be part of the field and part of the arts, but I believe that that's a big challenge for women who want to be taken seriously in their field of work. So obviously we have a long way to go. I definitely agree that it feels different right now. I feel that there's a bit of a tipping point happening. And what I mean by that is that we are not needing to defeminize ourselves to be powerful, but rather can celebrate the leadership capabilities that women have that are, you know, inherent in how we think, in our emotional intelligence, in our ability to sort of look to the future, in our ability to read other people. So a lot of those innate qualities in women are really important parts of leadership. Listening is very important. Empowering others is very important. Being able to delegate and develop and keep many multiple points of view in front of mind and stay focused are all, I think, things that women do really well. And maybe that's the kind of leadership that's called for right now. So I'm hopeful for the future, but if you want to talk about huge barriers, they exist everywhere.
I'd like to incorporate, there's some questions coming in the chat that are really relevant to the discussion that we're having now. So I'd like to incorporate some of them now. Brittney, I'm going to ask one, and then if you want to come in with Rosie's first question, I think it's really relevant to what we're speaking about. But just to piggyback off of what Khori is talking about, you know, one of the interesting things for me moderating this panel over the course of 4 years is that I'm really interested in the conversation about how you find balance for those of you that might be mothers, or if you're not, then, you know, oftentimes a lot of the, they call it the mental load of a household will fall on the women. I know exactly how many rolls of paper towels we have in our garage currently, and I'm sure Josh doesn't. He's wonderful, but it's just a thing that falls on to my shoulders. So the first year I asked the question, you know, how do you balance your home life for your kids or childcare or taking that break from your career and being able to jump in? And we had a bunch of teenage girls in the audience, and it was interesting because their reaction was, we should stop asking women that question. And my response was, I genuinely am still seeking that answer. And so it's why I want to ask that question rather than not asking women that question. I hope that we get to a point where we're also asking men that question so that the burden is shared more. So I'm asking this question again in that spirit, understanding that it shouldn't just be our responsibility, but that it often is. And so how have you dealt with some of that balance? How has it affected your career? And what do you think we can do moving forward to help women in these careers? Khori, a little bit, I heard you say childcare options, which I think is a great first step. But I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't have any answers right now. Our schools are shut down, and I'm, my husband and I both, I have to give him a lot of credit, no one's working in our house. So it's an equal opportunity crisis. But, part of why I stopped performing was because of my desire to be a mom. And I, Opera San Jose is sort of a unique company because in Europe, you can be an opera singer in one town. Every German city has an opera house, and every opera house has an ensemble of singers, and they live in that city, and they know those patrons, and they have families, and they often make a whole life. In America, to be an opera singer is to live in a hotel and to be somewhere for 6 weeks and somewhere else for 4 weeks and somewhere else. And you travel all around like that. And that never appealed to me because I knew I wanted to be a mom. I think it's not so much the industry itself, it's that the choices are too often black or white. It's stay home or have so much money that you can have full-time care, or, it feels too much either or. And how do we start to talk to women more honestly about what it feels like to live in the gray? Because everyone who juggles career and motherhood is in gray, and sometimes multiple times a day. And just owning that and saying it's not going to be like a perfect solution. And, you're going to have to make a choice at some point, and things are going to feel off kilter, and your children will pay the price sometimes for your career, but they will also have a mom who is pursuing her passion. They will also have a role model of somebody who's making a positive difference in their community. They will also see that their parents are both contributing in their own ways and chasing their dreams. So yes, you might not be there for every bedtime, but here's what your children get in return. And so what I like to do is to share those positive moments with other women and with young women and get them out of the false choice of either or.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
It's funny because what she's saying is pretty much also how I dealt with it. And first off, with regard to childcare, I will say that is one of my main issues while running for office, because I think that everyone should have access to affordable childcare, because that's what keeps women back. It really does. It certainly affects families in general, but it really does keep women back. And that is something that we need to do as a society to make sure that more people are trained to be in childcare and more people to help. Because believe me, I had childcare when I was working, when my children were young, but I still remember, and some of the issues that just jump out at me. I remember when my daughter was in the brownies, and I was in the middle of, and I was the brownie leader, and I was in the middle of working, and I would just drive 90 miles an hour to get to the brownie troop and then come back. That was never anything that my husband thought about doing, trust me. And I think that there needs to be real change in that dynamic. But I also agree with Khori. One of the things that really was significant is that now my kids are grown, and I thought this all along, that too often women are shamed for not spending more time with their children. and for working and doing other activities instead of being there all the time as the caretaker. But really, I can say this, and I've said this so many times, my kids, they know who I am, and also each one of them has in some ways followed in my footsteps. And I think the fact that I was working, the fact that I was, devoted to doing what I think are pretty important things, they did too. And they saw it. And I think that they are better for it. They're more independent adults and more concerned about some of the social justice issues that I imparted to them. So I think it's a struggle, but it's worth the struggle.
Well, I was on the bench 2 years when my husband and I adopted our daughter. She is now 34. My philosophy was that I brought her into our lives, and I owed it to her to do the very best to give her a good life, a happy and successful one. So I had to make the time for her, and I was determined that she came first. And I did have it good because I did get childcare just like Anne. In fact, we had many discussions about that back then. But I also had a mom who thought it was her life's work to take care of her grandkids. And I had a husband whose schedule was flexible enough to take her to school and bring her home. But every night, it was my job. I mean, we shared, but I made it my job to sit with her every day, to do her homework, to make sure that it was done. And then I did my work after she went to sleep. I enjoyed raising my daughter, and I know how hard it is now for the parents of kids who are home and they have to try to homeschool them and also do their work. So it's a very difficult time now where the kids can't be in school, and I don't know how the parents do their job. But I enjoyed having a kid. My only problem when we did adopt was that the court didn't recognize adoption the same as maternity leave. They felt that no bonding was necessary when you adopt a child. And so they wanted to deny me my maternity leave. But luckily for me at the time, there was a female presiding judge who says, you have to be home with your child, take your maternity leave. One judge even suggested that I donate my salary to charity for the time that I took off to bond with my child when we brought her home.
Wow.
Well, I was 16 when I got pregnant, and I came from a very traditional Catholic family. So as you can imagine, I got the silent treatment till I gave birth to, luckily, a son, because that's what healed my family. They were very supportive. I was able to go to school, but I did have to work 2 jobs. So that meant that I couldn't see my son as often as I'd like to. I had an early shift that started at 5, ended at 1:30, went to school from 2 to 8, and then worked as a waitress from 8:30, 9 o'clock till midnight or 1 in the morning. I missed out a lot, but I'm very fortunate that I had a supportive family. I mean, and not just my parents, I hear our moms, it's their jobs to take care of our children. My mom would say it was an honor, but she also had to work 2 jobs too. So we had a lot of support with my cousins, who are like my sisters and I love very much, and my aunts and uncles. To this day, I'm super grateful for that, because had they not provided that kind of support in childcare, I couldn't have worked 2 jobs and gone to college, and let alone have a career. And I was a single mom for 6 years, so it wasn't easy. But they sure made it easy for me, because I didn't realize how hard it is for a lot of young women or just grown adult women when they have children. Childcare is the most important thing. Right now that school is out, my staff member has an 8-year-old daughter, and she was getting ready to resign because she didn't know what else to do. So I was able to get a desk for her thanks to a very good friend of mine, and it's in my office, and now I have 5 staff members instead of 4. And it's really nice to see her here. And I really admire everyone right now during these trying times to accommodate their children with this new learning. You know, it's new for all of us. I don't know if I can do it again, even with the support of my family, but I really admire everyone doing that. So I wish I had better stories to tell you. When it comes to childcare, I had a mate, but unfortunately I also missed out a lot because of the choices I had to make to provide him a better life. Thank you.
Yeah, Maria, you're right. We ask this question every year, and I think that this year in particular, we're really seeing the effects of what we've all felt, but it's just, this year has just highlighted for my family, for Khori's family, for your staff member. You know, I don't know what families do that can't have a parent stay home. It's showing us how disparate our laws are. Brittney, it looks like we've got a question from Rosie and a question from Bertha that came in right after that. I think we can kind of combine the two of those together. Do you want to go ahead and read those?
Sure. Okay, so this first one is from Rosie Zapita. I want to ask the panelists about the page gap.
It's pay. She meant pay gap.
Pay gap, thank you. I will give you an example. My friend, who is African American at the University of Wisconsin, took over the same responsibilities and position previously held by 2 white men, paid $130, and she had to fight to get $70. I am Latina. A white woman had my position and she made $10K more than me. To piggyback off of this, Bertha also asked a similar question. Women today who are empowered through education tend to have fewer children and have them later. Do you agree, and how do you feel about that? So first prong of the question about the pay gap, second prong about women having children later.
The reason I think they're related is because I think that might be a result. I think women might be having children later because of what we're talking about and having to take time off of your career, and because of the pay gap and having to fight up the line. But have you experienced a pay gap in your careers? Do you have ideas of how we can combat that? And in your experience, are you seeing women having children later and in your lines of work?
Well, I can answer the second part about the women who want to have kids later. That's a very personal decision. I'm just impressed by women these days, no matter what job they have, lawyers, doctors, whatever position you hold. It's a very personal decision between you and your husband. And I don't think you necessarily have to make your career wait to have a child. And if you want to make it wait, that's okay too. I mean, if you have that gap in your resume, there is nothing wrong with that because you wanted to raise a family. I think that's perfectly great. I know I called my doctor for an appointment last week, and she was on maternity leave with her 3rd child. It's expected that you start your family when you want to. And one thing I think that you can do is, if you plan on having a family when you start your job, when you job hunt, you have to check the culture and philosophy of the company and make sure that's where you want to work so that you can feel free to make some of the decisions you want to make. It's a fine line, but I've envied a lot of people, a lot of women who had their children early, and their children are older when they go to work. I adopted my daughter a little later, and so I was always an older parent. So I think you just have to consider what's important to you and what you want in life, and that's what you do.
If I can add to that second question, I have a lot of family members like myself that had children very young. And the reason we chose to wait is because we wanted to, finish school and take advantage that we had, the help that we had from our family. But I also have a lot of friends and clients that they have 30-year-old children and now have 8 or 9-year-old children. And they tell me that although they love their older children with all their hearts, this second time around having younger children at a later age, they're able financially and emotionally to spend more time with them and just take every little hour of their life in. Where when they had, speaking for myself, when I had my younger child, my oldest child, I never really got to spend a whole lot of time with him, working 2 jobs and going to school, except for, you know, when I had breaks during college, or when I once a month had a weekend off. So, and I admire the women that are having their children later in life, because I can just imagine what that feels like to have your little ones in your life. And, you know, like you said, Rose before, it's your decision, and it's not a bad one, it's a great one.
And I just want to point out that women who get to choose when they have children are among a very small percentage of privileged women around the world. So even the conversation of deciding when it feels right for you is a wonderful conversation to be having.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
There's a question in the chat from Christian Martinez Morena that says, how do you all handle industries that may have been traditionally male dominated? Which I'm going to use to piggyback off my favorite question, which for you, I wrote, do you have a particularly impactful experience that you'd like to share? Before this panel started, a couple of you, I described them as Marcia stories. And I'll start off, I want to tell you one of mine that's a relatively minor story, but because it could have gone a different way had Judge Pichon not been in the room, I wanted to tell you that story. So I probably at this point had been an attorney maybe 5 or 6 years. I've been an attorney 10 years now. And I was downstairs at the Hall of Justice in one of these, what we call these cattle call courtrooms, where all the attorneys, the private attorneys, line up behind the podium, and we're just, the presiding judge is there just to assign us out to a trial courtroom. So Judge Pichon would take turns between the public defender, who sits at a big table at the front, and private defense counsel, and she would go back and forth. And there's like, I mean, easily 100 people in the room. And she just calls the case as the attorneys call them, one after another. And she's just assigning a courtroom and a day and a time. And so I'm standing in line with all of the other attorneys, and I get to the front. And when I get to the front, the public defender leans over to me and he says, "Which case is yours?" Which was a little bit unusual, but it's something that would happen not at this stage of a criminal trial, but right in the beginning, because the public defender handles all of the cases that a private attorney doesn't show up for. So usually they're asking that question because they want to mark it off the list. This is really late in the game for him to have been asking me that question, but I didn't think too much of it. And so I tell him the name of my case. And when we get to the front and Judge Pichon looks at me to call my case, this gentleman, this male public defender, calls my case. And at that point, Judge Pichon was the only person in the courtroom that understood what was happening. I still couldn't understand why he was calling my case. And what happened is, in this long line of attorneys, he looked and assumed that I was the defendant and not an attorney. And Judge Pichon didn't recognize, I didn't have enough of a relationship with you that you recognized me as an attorney because I was somebody that you knew. You just recognized that it was possible for a young woman in a suit that was standing in line with these other attorneys to be an attorney. And so she just took off her glasses and looked at this attorney and just paused. And everyone sort of looked around uncomfortably. I came to the realization of what was happening, and I think I flushed red. And he just, under your stare, sat down, and you put your glasses back on, and you smiled at me, and you said, "Hello, counselor. You may proceed." And I've had so many experiences that had been so much, that experience could have been so terrible, but having another woman in the room that recognized exactly what was happening because you could empathize with me and with that situation, turned what could have been one of my really awful stories into a really positive experience where I felt like there's somebody here who sees me, and there's somebody here who wants me to do well, somebody who's encouraging me to just don't think about what just happened and just succeed. Just call your case and say what you need to say and move on. So that was one of my stories of that I'm hoping to hear more from you of those kinds of experiences, and was my opportunity to officially say thank you to Judge Pichon for seeing me in that moment and recognizing what I was going through. Does anybody else have experiences that they want to share?
That's a great story.
Something that in your male dominated field, something someone said to you, or an experience. And I'm really hoping that the more we can share these kinds of experiences with each other, the more younger women or other women in industries will know that they're not alone in these experiences. I'm hoping that one of you will jump in. Anne told me a couple before we were on, so I know you have them.
Oh, I have like a long list of them about because obviously, I've been a lawyer a long time, back when it was clearly, the question was male-dominated industry. When I started at the county counsel's office, number one, I got my job because of affirmative action, just to be clear. And there were 2 women in the office, and there were about 35 men, all named Bob. And so I had a number of the experiences, like the one, Risa, that you told about adoption, because my oldest son is adopted from Brazil, and we went to Brazil to bring him back. And one of the men in the office told the county council then, oh, she should not be able to get maternity leave for going to Brazil to get her son. That's wrong. I mean, why someone would take it upon himself to deny me of that was unbelievable. But it was an example, honestly, of what happened. And, as I progressed in my career, I think that one of the questions that one of the things we talked about was me being in court as the senior lawyer, as the supervising lawyer, in a case in San Francisco that went on for 3 weeks. So I was living in a hotel. My children were back in the house with, who knows, they still survived my husband taking care of them. And I never forget, because the judge, when he called the lawyers up for a discussion at the bench, said to my male subordinate, could you please come to the bench for me to have this conversation with you? And it was totally ridiculous. And then, as I mentioned to you, at the end of the trial, the jury commented that it was really terrible that I wore the same jacket a couple of times. It's like, this would never be the kind of comment that would be made to a man. But in some ways, I think the way to look at this for women today who are still experiencing this, and others, in some ways, these things have made me tougher, honestly. And if we go to it, I have another story that happened at the FEC later. But I think you have to realize that it isn't you, and these things are not about you. These things are about them. And if you, and a lot of women tend to be very sensitive. I know, and felt that maybe there was something about me that caused the judge to think that I wasn't worthy of being called up or something. But I think that women have to recognize that this is unfortunately the world that we're still in, and that it's really not, that they should not take those kinds of actions personally.
I would really like to follow up with that, because Anne, you said it's not you. And what I was going to say tonight is it's not your fault. I thought everything was my fault. I always looked at what I did to see why it happened. So I came through when there weren't that many women judges, and there were very few women judges of color. And so the Judicial Council is the policy-making body for all of the courts in the state. And they worked very hard to promote their judges of color and their women judges, and to put them out front. So I was on a number of committees and commissions back then, and I was appointed by the Chief Justice to serve on the Center for Judicial Education and Research, very prestigious body, set all of the education standards for the state, and we also set up all of the education programs in the state. So I was elected to be chair of that group, and which meant that for each education program in the state, I would fly to wherever the program was, and I would do the introduction. That was one of my duties. And so I would dutifully leave home, leave my child and my husband, get on an airplane and fly to wherever the meeting was, sit in the front row in front of the chair of that particular education program. And do you know, 9 times out of 10, they forgot to introduce me. So I would be hurt to the quick. Somebody would run to the front and say, yeah, you forgot to introduce Judge Pichon. And then it's like, oh, I mean, they have a program, so there's no forgetting who to introduce, right? So I have to say, what I did back then was I had this set of tapes that was called The Art of Winning. And I lived with those. When something like that would go wrong, I would assume, okay, what did I do? Should I have introduced myself earlier, or should I have let him know, don't forget to introduce me? And I'm the person sitting right in front of you waiting to come up. So I would play those tapes every single day. But first, I couldn't get to my room to play the tape because I traveled with him too. So my first order of business would be many trips to the ladies' room, because that's where I would hide out and get my feelings and get myself back in order, and then go back out again. And then after, I would go to my room, listen to the tape, and I just said, forge ahead, keep going, because that's just the way it is. Do what you have to do, but don't let anybody take anything from you.
Well, mine, it's not as nice as yours, everyone I've been hearing, but I promise you the outcome will be. A very long time ago, I did apply for this one position, and I had no idea that for a while they were trying to hire in-house. So went for the interview, got hired on the spot, and started that same day. It was a small little agency. I oversaw the work of 25 women and a few men. And the men were not happy. I mean, they made it very clear I wasn't welcome. The looks, the remarks about my ethnicity under their breath as I walked was insulting. But I was a new person. I was a woman. I didn't want to lose my job. I had a son to take care of. And this was right after college. So I did my best to lead my team. But it got to the point where these gentlemen turned my team against me. It got so bad. I just wanted to quit, but I'm not a quitter. And I thought, I'm just going to stick it out a little bit longer, see if I can win them over. Well, that didn't happen. As I was coming down the stairs with the stack of files, one of the girls there that was friends with the gentleman decided to kind of brush me a little bit. And that's all it took for me to fall down 3 flights of stairs and damage both my arms and even get fired, believe it or not. So that was probably the darkest time of my life, because I couldn't believe how much hate people had based on being a man, thinking that they were superior, and because they had more seniority, they should have gotten the job. And then being Latina. And it really broke me because I wasn't brought up in a household where our race had anything to do with how we grow up. We are who we are because we work hard and we are strong and we support each other. So this was all naive. I might sound naive, but very new to me. So 3 months into physical therapy, I met this amazing person, and we had therapy the same days, and he'd always compliment my hair because with both my arms being damaged, I had to get tendons replaced on both of them. I couldn't do my makeup but I did brush my hair very nicely. So we built up this really nice relationship, and he, gave me his business card and said, when you're ready to come back to work, I want you to come work for me. I'm only one person. You can hire who you want. We don't have to hire more than 2 or 3 people. The most important thing, I want you to teach them your values. Well, he was a man in the insurance industry, and I stayed with him for 11 years. And instead of seeing a gentleman with jealousy and animosity, he taught me the industry. He taught me how to be tough, how to have thick skin, especially around men. And then later sold me the agency. So, like I said, it started off bad, but it ended up good. And I never expected anyone besides my family to make me feel so important besides, like I said, my family. And I owe it all to him. A man. Thank you.
Khori, do you have any of those stories you want to share? It's okay if you don't. You're muted.
Was I muted?
No, you weren't. You're
no,
good.
I could hear you, Maria. Sorry, I was muted. I do have stories like that, and still, and some of them are related to my gender, some are related to my age. What I would say is, I remember interviewing for a job in India at the National Center for the Performing Arts. And my father is a very supportive person in my life, and he worked at NASA his whole career. And when I told him I wanted to go into music, he was sort of like, okay. That was not what my parents had in mind. But he's always sort of been my champion. And with the exception of when I wanted to accept this job for the National Center for Performing Arts in India. And he threw a fit, and he said, I did not leave that place so that you would go back. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you just don't know. You just don't know. And I think he's right. I mean, what it is to be a woman in so many places. I feel incredibly grateful to be in the Bay Area, to be in California, to be in a place where, yes, people think that I'm the communications intern. Yes, people make comments about my appearance. Yes, people, are shocked that, I thought you were a mom, and who's with your children right now? Those little things happen all the time. But I do feel, and I've always felt, that I stand on the shoulders of the women who have come before me. My mom, my grandma, as I mentioned, these incredible women who were really on the pioneers in making a place for all of us. And now what I need to do is shine my brightest, because I was planted in a place where I can. And so, yes, you can reveal your ignorance by making assumptions about me, but it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop my shine. And so I take a lot of strength from hearing these other women and bearing witness to their experiences, knowing that it did not derail them, and knowing that whatever experiences I have, or my children, my daughters have, it will not derail them either. And it may be, as Anne said, that we do need to be tougher, that we do need to be less sensitive, and that these situations help us get there. But I just feel overwhelmingly grateful to have found my way into the job that I'm in, and I'm going to make the most of it, because a lot of other women never had that opportunity.
Can I add a story?
Please.
Because this one is a little more recent for me, and it's all part of what we've all been talking about. So when I was at the Federal Election Commission, one of my fellow commissioners, I just remember this so clearly because you and I were talking about anti-Semitism early on. And he said to me, because I am a Latina, my mother was Brazilian, I grew up in Latin America, but he said to me, well, you can't be a Latina because you're Jewish. I said, oh, really? Okay. And then later, he went on Fox News twice because he didn't like something I was proposing at the commission and said that I was trying to shut down the internet single-handedly. I just want you to know I'm so good. But he went on twice and must have said a few other things because I started to get thousands. And in fact, the federal police were, there to protect me of death threats, anti-Semitic and misogynist, really misogynist communications. The emails, Twitter, I still have a pile this big of them. And, when they first started coming in, I thought, oh my God, how could they say these things? And I felt like scared and worried. But I finally realized they were trying to shut me up. They were trying to intimidate me. And I don't think that women should let people do that to them. I think we need to be strong enough, as scary as it was, be strong enough to just realize, as we were talking about before, that it's really them that are reprehensible. It's not us. So
hard to remember that in the moment.
I know it is. It's really hard. I mean, honestly, I was
like, how can you not like me?
Yes, well, it wasn't so much that. I mean, this was a little more scary, like, things like, well, you should stick it up your
No, I don't mean your situation. I just mean in general that misogyny that hangs over us. Yeah.
It does. No, it does. But I think, I really felt that it was very helpful for me to kind of get to that point where I realized, oh, it's them that are totally screwed up. I didn't do anything, So, yeah, no, it's hard. I agree.
Yeah, Khori, I totally empathize with that last thing that you said. I think that as women, part of what's been so important in our culture and our upbringing is to be a people pleaser and to have people. It's part of the culture of being a woman, is that you want to be a good girl, you want to do the right thing. I mean, even Maria, it's like you want to please your family, you want to be that nun because you want to do the right thing. And so I think for me, it's this feeling that the work that I do for the community is the way that I open myself up to criticism, which is such an interesting dynamic, because I do feel that I'm here to serve you. I'm here because I love my community, because I love my country, because I love my neighbors. And why don't you love me back? Because, I think that that's so much been a part of my identity as a girl and as a woman, is that you're supposed to be polite and have people like you and follow the rules. And so I'll take that, Anne, with me and try to get a little bit more of that backbone of they're trying to shut you up for a reason, and so you can't back down. Mm-hmm. You got to stand up for what you believe in and just keep being yourself.
Yeah, and it's working if stuff like that is happening to you. You know that you're impacting others in your community and making change. And if you weren't, that kind of hate wouldn't be coming your way.
Yeah. So we're actually already at the end here. So I'm going to have Brittney, if you can ask Ashley Dargert's first question, and then I'm going to wrap up I'm going to combine Suman and Councilmember Fred Tovar's questions to end the evening. So let's do Ashley's question first.
Okay, great. This question is from Ashley Dargert. She says, do you have any tips for getting involved in a career field you are unfamiliar with or does not have a clearly structured job path? Asking as an MMP candidate that wants to start a career in influencing policy to help improve the lives of women and other marginalized groups.
So what do you do if you're interested in a career that you're not familiar with? This was something that I struggled with. As I said, I watched The West Wing and found out that they went to law school, and so enrolled. I read an LSAT book to myself for 2 weeks and then went and took the LSAT. I didn't even know anyone that had ever taken it. But what do you do when you're interested in a career that you don't know anything about? How do we advise those women, those young women?
I would, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please, go ahead.
Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I would advise them to try to connect with someone in that field, maybe pick their brain a little bit. In my case, my uncle was a retired insurance agent, so I didn't even know this was a path I wanted to go to. And that opportunity at 19 that I lost, you know, I got offered a book of business. That was then. That was from him. So I picked his brain a little bit, and I really enjoyed his ability to be able to give back to the community and his attentiveness to his clients. He wasn't just an agent. He was more like a hero to them because he helped them with everything from fundraising to, you know, getting involved in their kids' soccer league to, you know, back then they didn't have a GoFundMe. They would get a little envelope and ask all the other agents, you know, to get involved and pay. I picked his brain a little bit about, you know, well, what else besides that do you do? What is so great about selling car insurance, you know? And he went into detail with me and said, look, it's not just about selling car insurance. It's about advising your clients. It's about helping a family. It's about selling them a life insurance policy so the day that something happens, they aren't worried about, you know, how they're going to pay for it, everything. And more importantly, it'll help you take care of your family and you can sleep at night. So this is someone I had to talk to because he was in that industry and I was thinking of getting into it. But when I saw that, and I went with him a couple weeks to his office to, you know, kind of see what it entitled, it turned me on to it. And I really enjoyed it and I dove into it. So my advice is find an industry or someone that's involved in that industry and just talk to them, ask for their advice, pick their brain. How is your day to day? You know, how much time does it consume and how does it benefit you? And if you can't find anyone, always call your local chamber's office. I'm sure Brittney's got someone that you might be interested in talking to.
It's a great idea. Call Brittney.
Call Brittney.
I have to say that I was going to say the very same thing. I took lessons from my niece, who is a superstar. She graduated a couple of years ago, and she wanted to take a job outside of the area that she got her master's degree in. And so what she did was she would do informational interviews. People were very kind to her in granting the interviews and giving her information so that she could decide what company she would like to work in and what area she would like to pursue. So she did her research on companies, and she also contacted people in the fields and asked them if they didn't mind just spending 15 minutes with her so that she could get to understand what would be involved in that particular area.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I hear from young women and young men all the time who want to learn more about the future of opera, administration, everything that I do. And it is one of my favorite parts of my job to be able to reach out and make that connection. And likewise, I have a cherished group of mentors from all industries that I am constantly asking that they be generous with their time for me. So it never stops. You're always mentoring, you're always being mentored, you're always a teacher, you're always a student. And so there are things about a specific industry that you need to know if you're interested, but there are also lessons to be learned from everybody working in different industries. The fact that you're watching this panel tonight, I hope you take something away from it. And I just want to say it's a pleasure for me to hear from people like you who are, learning to find answers, and it's a joy to be a part of that journey for someone. So please don't hesitate. People don't mind. They like it.
Can I give a slightly different answer? Because I agree with what everybody said about the way to do it. But I would also say, it's good to take risks in your career. A lot of people don't feel they can. They've kind of set out a path and they want to, be partners in law firms or something like that. But really, maybe you'll find that you're really passionate about something totally different. And so taking on the ability to think about something different and try it, and then try something different as well, at least that has worked for me in my career. And I think that I've benefited from doing that.
I had a dean at Santa Clara Law tell me once, nothing has to be forever that you don't want it to be. And I don't know why that was such a realization for me, but especially at that point of my career, it felt like every decision I was making was setting in stone the rest of my life. And just getting the freedom to have somebody say to you, you can try something, and if it doesn't work, you can try something else. That you have this whole big life, and not every decision has to be like that. That I think that's really, really important, really great advice. Okay, I want to move to the end here. First, Khori, this is directed to you. Our friend Suman from AAUW, when you made a comment earlier, and I wanted to highlight this. Suman said, I empathize and have had bad experiences with what Khori has said about being a woman in India. There's a reason I live here, and I feel privileged being here too. Just wanted to let you know that you spoke to Suman, and I wish that you could. She's a wonderful person. I wish you could see her. We'll have to have like a reunion or something when we can see each other in person.
Maybe Suman will hit me up on LinkedIn and we can have a chai on Zoom.
I'm sure she would love that. So our last questions I'm going to combine from both Suman and then also our friend, Gilroy Council member, Fred Tovar. Fred, we love our men who support us. Thank you for being here tonight. So Suman says, what message would you like to give young women? I have a 25-year-old daughter working in New York, and she definitely deals with all the issues you've discussed here. And Fred says, what advice would you give young women in working to succeed in their chosen careers? So let's go through one by one and give your last words of advice for young women or young boys, young men who are starting out in their careers. And Khori, Suman would love to connect with you. So, let's start with Judge Pichon. Any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, and thank you. It's very important to believe in yourself and to be confident in yourself. I know that coming through as a lawyer and a judge, as you can see from the way I present myself, that I'm a really nice person, that I seem kind and compassionate and empathetic. And yes, that's who I am. And I got a lot of grief for that. But over the years, I said that is who I am. I'm sorry, I'm not going to change. I'm going to make sure I'm well prepared, I'm competent in what I do, that I am independent, and that I have the courage to do what I think is right. And, I have achieved a lot over the years, but it took some hard times and some grief. But I just believe you just can't give up. And you have to keep trying. And with all the hurt feelings that you're going to have in the middle, that's just a part of life. That's how you learn. You can do it. You just have to stay on your path and believe that you can do it. Preparation, knowledge, studying, research, doing your very best, and providing the best service are all things that you're going to do because that's who you are. but you don't have to change the person that you are.
I love that. Anne.
I would just say ditto. I mean, honestly, you said it all, Risa. But I also would say, just generally, don't think that there's just one path to success. There's a lot of paths to success. And it is true. You have to be who you are. You have to be true to yourself. And I also think that you shouldn't, sort of just look up. And I love the fact that Khori talked about this, about talking to all kinds of people. I do the same. And I think you have to be thoughtful and considerate of all your colleagues, up and down, and try be the kind of person that you really are. I think women have really great skills. We're collaborative mostly. We do have empathy and honesty and transparency, and all these things work to our benefit ultimately. As difficult as it can be to be a woman in the workplace sometimes, nonetheless, I think that we generally, except for when we feel insecure and worried about, whether we're doing the right thing, I think we generally can succeed and will succeed. So be who you are.
Maria.
Well, I would say just be yourself. Be passionate, be assertive, use your voice, make sure you're heard. If you're passionate about something, just follow through with it. People will be behind you. Someone mentioned educate yourself. Absolutely. During this pandemic, I sell insurance for a living. The only software I ever wanted to learn was what I needed to type up a quote and bind coverage. I've actually had to go back and learn how to use different softwares, digital marketing, doing videos, and it has been so rewarding, especially since I haven't been in school in over 20 years. So constantly educate yourself. And if you need a mentor, you need anyone to talk to, I'm just a Zoom, phone call, or email away. I will be more than happy to mentor you. Good luck, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you. And Khori, you have the final word.
Oh, no. I think for me, a big shift happened when I leaned into my biggest fears. What is it about fundraising or budgeting that made me anxious? Where is the heat there that I am avoiding? And having the ability to be completely honest about my limitations and not have to pretend for my team or for myself that I have skills that I don't have, but instead I can be really dispassionately honest about where I thrive and where I could use further development. And that allowed me to begin to think of myself in the CEO role instead of a supporting role. And once you make that shift in your own mind that, no, actually I've considered this industry deeply and I have a vision for what I would contribute to it. The universe picks up on that shift, I believe. So knowing yourself, spending quiet time, figuring out where your own misogyny lies, where your own messages about your limitations lie, where your own imposter syndrome is triggered, and figuring out how do you shift your own mind. I think right now in particular, there's a real temptation to say, this happened and it wasn't right and it prevented me from this and that and the other. I believe that every challenge is an opportunity, and every day you make 10,000 choices, and the choice you made at 9 a.m. is different than the choice you might make at 4, and you just got to keep moving forward.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. I have to tell you that the chat is lighting up. Maria, you have a big fan, and Bertha Valenzuela, who wants you to know that she's here and supporting you. It's, we've got the women that are and the men that are on the call now, and also on Facebook, a bunch of people, but it really feels like we were able to have an intimate conversation, and I really appreciate that. I think we're all so eager for those kinds of human connections right now, and I feel so inspired by all of you. And really, honestly, I was feeling really down coming into this week, It's something we've been looking forward to this week for years, because we knew it was going to be the centennial, and not being able to be with you all was such a bummer. But I just so appreciate you opening up and being willing to have the conversation in this way. So thank you so much. Brittney, do you have anything to add?
No, this has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, though we couldn't meet in person, this is better than not meeting at all. So thank you.
Yeah. So thanks again so much. I appreciate all of you, and thanks to everyone that's watching at home. Have a wonderful evening.
I hope to someday meet all you beautiful women.
Yeah, we should do a reunion or something.
Yes, I agree.
I'll
After all this is over.
Right.
Thank you so much, you guys. You guys have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.